Good evening. Thank you for joining us for another edition of the Tamils Against Genocide report. Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin once cynically remarked that 1 million deaths in a genocide is a statistic. 1 or 2 is a tragedy. This evening we'd like to focus on not the statistic, but the tragedies that are occurring with regard to the genocide against Tamils in Sri Lanka. But at the outset, I'd like to dispel, I think, a common misunderstanding that purports to give some comfort level and perhaps despair to those who are the victims of genocide in Sri Lanka, that those in the government are somehow immune from the legal process because they're there in Colombo, they're there within the sovereignty of Sri Lanka. That simply is a falsehood. International law and the laws of the United States recognize certain kinds of heinous misconduct, including genocide, that's subject to the courts of justice in all countries of the world, including the United States of America. For instance, with regard to those who are victims of extrajudicial killings, their survivors have a right in the United States to sue those who are the culprits in Sri Lanka, irrespective of their presence within a different sovereignty. Moreover, it's oftentimes, I think, misunderstood that the only persons culpable under the criminal law are those who in fact did the dastardly deed, used the weapon, dropped the bomb, used the hand grenade or otherwise. The highest officials in the Sri Lankan government cannot hide behind sovereignty as a shield to the criminal and civil law of all nations in the world. The United States law itself summons any foreign official to its courts to answer for any extrajudicial killing, which they ordered directly or indirectly. But let's take a look at the year 2006 in Sri Lanka, at 3 incidents that give vivid expression to the ongoing genocide and the pain and terror that it is inflicting on the Tamil population. First, we encounter a grisly hanging of 4 individuals in the home of Dr. Murthy Martin. His wife, 27 years old, was raped. He had 2 children, 2 and 7. They were killed, and he himself was hanged. They were killed in a most grisly fashion, including carpenter's tools, and then hanged. And public display and pictures were shown in order to terrorize the Tamil population. Now, ordinarily, you would expect with such a grisly crime, it might be called a My.A massacre in Vietnam, only in microcosm, that you would expect a thorough investigation of law enforcement authorities. After all, every civilized government has an obligation to do their best effort to uncover and punish any person guilty of murder. The fundamental principle of civilization is that the government has a duty to protect the lives of all of its citizens. But, as has been true for 6 decades, nothing was done. No investigation, no inquiry, nothing. It is an earmark of the resignation, I think, of the world and even the Tamil population in Sri Lanka, that it goes unnoticed that the norm, not the exception, is to leave all crimes against Tamils uninvestigated, unpunished, and unresolved. Let's go now to a second incident in 2006. This is the killings, the assassinations, if you will, of 17 ACF workers who were involved in humanitarian aid in the Tamil Northeast. Again, we find no investigation whatsoever to this heinous crime, calculated to deny all humanitarian aid to Tamils, which itself is a crime of genocide, calculated to frighten and remove all NGOs from the north or the east so there'll be no eyes and ears to report on the ongoing genocide. And the government concocts what's called a commission of inquiry or commission of investigation. It goes to COI. But of course, this inquiry was a show inquiry, like Stalinist show trials. It was not intended to be serious. And we have had those who have left the commission and complained that it was not serious about uncovering any of the evidence and punishing any of the culprits. It was there to propitiate, to mollify international critics who are complaining that nothing was done with regard to these genocidal crimes. And indeed, there has been a call from the Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial killings from the UN, insisting that there needs to be a neutral, independent, international investigation. Now, I'd like to pause a bit and explore that idea. An international investigation would not be unprecedented. And for instance, when there was a prominent Lebanese politician, Rafik Hariri, who was assassinated in 2005, the United Nations created a special investigative authority to investigate the crime, which seemed to implicate the government of Syria, even the president of Syria. Not only did the United Nations Security Council step into that police activity, they later created a special tribunal to try the alleged culprits in the assassinations of Mr. Hariri, to try them in the Netherlands. And that obviously is something that the United Nations needs to be approached with regard to investigating the Trincomalee, the ACF killings of 17. An outside investigative force, an outside tribunal. It's obvious that the government of Sri Lanka will do nothing because all of the earmarks, circumstantial evidence, and motivations indicate the government itself was implicated. Let me go now to a third instance, also in 2006. It goes by the name of the Trinco 5. You may recall that there were 5 students who were assassinated by the security forces of Sri Lanka. One of the students was the son of a Dr. Manharan, and he, in a very brave and courageous action, gave testimony through a deposition by satellite to the Commission of Inquiry. But in that deposition and in later remarks, Dr. Manharan, who I want to underscore again is a very brave and courageous man, revealed that he was told he could see the body of his son only if he contrived the label Tamil Tiger to attach to the son, which would explain the mass murders of the Trinco 5. Of course, he declined to do that. He was also offered a bribe in the form of house if he remained silent. But he gave testimony, and shortly after, the government of Sri Lanka, the Commission of Inquiry, then refused any further foreign satellite investigative depositions because they feared candor. They didn't have an opportunity to intimidate the witness, as would be true if the satellite broadcast was in Sri Lanka itself or otherwise. Dr. Manohar Haran deserves a salute from all those in the human rights and Tamil community for displaying the courage and strength to move forward in an aggressive fashion to bring the culprits in the Sri Lankan government to justice for the Trinco 5. Now, the Trincomalee 5 is further instructive because of its aftermath. There was a brave reporter on the scene who took photographs of the killings. In fact, wrote a story about it in the next day's newspapers, and himself was assassinated. And in the United States, for many years, we've had a law called the Torture Victims Protection Act, and that empowers any individual who survives someone who is the victim of an extrajudicial killing under a foreign law, including the foreign law of Sri Lanka, to file suit in the United States and to recover damages. And of course, those who can be the defendants can include the highest officials in the land of Sri Lanka or elsewhere. There have been suits brought against former president of the Philippines, Mr. Ferdinand Marcos. There have been suits brought against Radovan Karadzic, who was the president of the Bosnian Republic of Srpska. So there's no immunity under our law, no matter how high up you are in the Sri Lankan government. And on that score, I think we all need to get together and support these kinds of opportunities and avenues of redress and give comfort and security and encouragement to those who have the strength and fortitude to look the Rajapakses, the General Fonsecas in the face and say, no more, enough. One genocide over, a genocide over 60 years has got to stop. Thank you and good evening.